Good news, everyone! No, it's bad news. It's bad news. Climate change is happening, and it's ramping up, and no one seems to care. And not even a sci-fi plot can save us now. Although, maybe it might help to put some things into perspective. So like I said, bad news everyone. Climate change is happening, it's almost entirely our fault, and it's getting worse. Unfortunately, nations aren't moving as quick as they need to, and the situation is dire. Futurama famously poked fun at our apathy when they said future humans counteract global warming by simply dropping a giant ice cube into the ocean every once in a while. This theoretically makes sense, but is ridiculous. But how ridiculous? That's our question. To visualize our cube and our growing problem, we first need to know how much heat the Earth is trapping. The Earth is trapping heat for the same reason your car gets hot in a parking lot on a sunny day. The radiation coming through your windshield goes through, but some of that gets trapped when it tries to come back out, stays in your car, and makes it hotter. The more glass you have in the way, or the more greenhouse gases you pump into the atmosphere, the more radiation is going to stay trapped inside the windshield or inside Earth's atmosphere, and the hotter both get. The amount of trapped heat is now Earth's energy imbalance. The incoming and outgoing radiation used to be a fairly stable relationship until the Industrial Revolution came along. And then that happened. The energy imbalance, as reported by James Hansen and colleagues in 2012, is at least 0.58 watts per square meter. Now, this doesn't look like a big number, but the Earth has a lot of square meters, a lot of surface area. So when you multiply the surface area of the Earth times this number, you get at least 300 terawatts of extra energy coming from climate change. This is 100 times more than average global power consumption by humans. With all this extra energy, we can find the size of our theoretical cube. Futurama was always both funny and smart, so the writers probably knew that it takes a lot of energy to melt ice, which is why their ice cube in the episode wasn't ginormous. Probably. And melting ice isn't as easy as simply raising its temperature. It needs a little extra something called the enthalpy of fusion, which is an extra little kick of energy it takes to make something go from a solid into a liquid, even if it's at melting temperature. Ice's enthalpy of fusion is 333.5 joules per gram. So if we take the extra energy that Earth is getting from climate change each year and divide this by the enthalpy of fusion, we should get the amount of ice each year that we need, assuming that we can get all of the heat to flow into a giant ice cube perfectly at 0 degrees Celsius to combat climate change like Futurama did. Doing that calculation gives us 30 quintillion grams of ice. And if the density of ice at 0 degrees is a little bit less than water, then this is a total of 31,000 cubic kilometers of ice. Here is my terrible version of New York City's skyline. And here is the ice cube you would need. If you could take all of the extra heat that's coming in due to global warming and put it all into melting a giant ice cube, the ice cube would have sides of 31 kilometers. Can you see the problem here? Shut up and take my science! Seriously, this is important. Jeez. Where would you even get all of this ice? Nowhere, probably? Even if you gave every single human being on Earth a refrigerator, and they could produce maybe 5 kilograms of ice per day from that refrigerator, it would still take the entire human population over 2,000 years to make just one of these ice cubes. Even if you couldn't make it, how would you transport it? Not even 50 million of the world's largest tanker ships could move all that ice. Oh, come on! Oh, is this making sense? It's a lot of ice. There are ways to use less. You could start with a colder ice cube, and there are other problems. You would be adding 6,000 trillion gallons of water to the oceans each year. But it's just a visualization. It's a problem. I'm not in the mood, Hypnotoad. Futurama's giant ice cube isn't a viable plan, of course. It's just a visualization. It's a way to make climate change not just an idea in your head and more of a thing that's happening now. Climate change is the greatest challenge of our time, and I hope that people smarter than me will get serious about it soon, or at least help others to. People like you. It's not gonna be a giant spaceship with a giant ice cube that comes and saves us and our coastlines and our crops and our animal cousins and everything, really. It's gonna be you and mine, our collective will and our human ingenuity. Because science. Thank you so much for watching. Sorry if I depressed you. At TayloMid asks, what time area do you think Pokemon takes place in? Because, you know, the insects were as big as humans in that show. Good question. About 300 million years ago, the Earth had about 50% more oxygen in its atmosphere than it does now, and that allowed for insects and like dragonflies the size of pelicans, which is awesome to think about if you're trying to think about like a butterfree or a venomoth or something. And the reason that was possible is because insects don't breathe like we do, taking in oxygen and distributing it through the volume of our bodies. They breathe through small holes in their bodies called spiracles. So when an insect increases in size, its volume increases exponentially faster than its surface area does, so there's only so much growth that can happen there in terms of size, because you need to get gas to all parts of that volume, depending on the surface area where the spiracles are. So maybe Pokemon takes place hundreds of millions of years ago. Do you know how depressed I get about this? I calculated once that using average sea level rise and some Google Map stuff, that where Gullah Gullah Island films, like Gullah Gullah Island for all intents and purposes, you know, Bollywood, you know that old show, it's gonna be underwater in our lifetimes. Oh, not Gullah Gullah. Oh, someone. Musk, help us.